What can we learn from bathrooms at nightclubs? Well, all sorts of things, but us drug scientists are using it to figure out what drugs people are taking. And that's because we don't really have a good way of measuring this. So, the primary way that we look to see how many different drugs that people are taking and which ones are like the new trends is just by asking them. And the main problem here is that people lie, and rightfully so in a lot of cases. Not unexpected that when we ask people about like how much snow they're taking, they're like, "Oh yeah, I don't use that. That's illegal. Didn't you hear?" And even when we tell people like, "No, seriously, there's no consequences," or "No, seriously, we need to know because like doctors need to be able to understand how different drugs interact," that does not mean that people are going to tell the truth. This has all sorts of consequences for people who are trying to help with things like addiction. So, if we don't know what people are primarily using because they're unwilling to tell us, we can't figure out how to help people or how to warn them about things that are unsafe or how to tell them how to use something more safely. So, like, we need to come up with a better way of figuring out what people are taking that's not just relying on them telling the truth. We currently do this in some genuinely weird ways. So there's the whole wastewater analysis, which became a topic of conversation during COVID because we started testing for that. We've been testing wastewater for drugs for a while now. There was also a recent study that I talked about where they were looking at the dust at various places to see how many drugs were just powder in the dust. Powder in the Dust, great song name. So there's this brand new way that people were suggesting, which is just swabbing nightclubs. So this is the new scientific way of determining what drugs people are taking, because we see that nightclubs, specifically like EDM nightclubs, are kind of the sentinel for drug use. So it is a community that's more prone to using new types of drugs, and they're kind of like the people that we watch to see what drug trends are coming about. This entire premise seems like kind of a little slimy to just be like, "Oh yeah, we see that this community uses drugs a lot." So instead of like trying to help them maybe or like figure out their perspectives on drug use, instead let's just study them from like a public health perspective. Like it seems a little slimy, but that is what we do because there's no other real good way of doing this. So in this study, they were trying to figure out, yeah, can we just look at this type of community? Can we look at where they spend their time and see if this can tell us about drug trends? So, a group of scientists just basically went out to nightclubs. They went after 11 p.m. to a variety of nightclubs in Brooklyn, New York, specifically ones that were popular in the EDM community. And they swabbed a variety of surfaces. So they specifically swabbed a lot of places in the bathroom because this is where drug use takes place. So they were swabbing the tops of the toilet lids, the tops of tampon dispensers, basically toilet paper holders. They were swabbing everywhere that they thought people would use drugs. They also swabbed places like the tops of bars and things like the dance floors to see if we were like accidentally contaminating ourselves with them. Now I'm trying to figure out who is actually doing this and how you pitch this to like a research assistant. Like, "Hey, we're going to send you to some EDM nightclubs. Have fun. But also you're going to be swabbing the toilets." I don't know. Will people find that to be a thing they'd want to do or not want to do? That's a toss up for me. But it reminds me of one of my favorite studies where they're looking at pheromones. And so the scientists actually went to strip clubs to see how many tips the dancers would make, dependent on their menstrual cycle. And yeah, that person's science, they had their funding to just go to strip clubs. Gotta love science sometimes. So, anyways, these scientists were swabbing the nightclub bathrooms, and then they had control environments. So they said, okay, we think that people will take drugs at the nightclubs, but let's have some control environments where people are not going to be using. So just to see like what general levels of these would be. And so they swabbed specifically park benches, which that's questionable to me because I'm fairly sure use takes place there. And then subway seats, again, questionable, and laundromats. Now, laundromats is one that I'm like, do people use drugs at laundromats? I am honestly not sure. Park benches, yes. Laundromats, though. So they had the control environments and then they had the nightclub environments, and they were seeing like, okay, what are people actually using? Perhaps surprising to absolutely no one, blow was everywhere. Like literally everywhere. They said that it was found in every night at every club. Het was the second most popular, being found in about 80% of swabs, and weirdly, Molly was only found in about a quarter of all swabs. They also found lidocaine, which makes sense because you actually see that a lot of drugs are cut with that. And then also quinine and things like bath salts too. But blow was not just found in nightclubs. It was found in 50% of park benches and subway seats, and yes, in restaurant bathrooms too. Which goes with my pet theory that more people are using blow than we think. Like, there's a statistic in this study that says that 1/5 of all people who entered a nightclub said that they had used it in the last month. Yeah, I think it's more than that. But this type of research can actually tell us that. Like, how do we know who is actually using it here? So is it like one person who's using a lot, who's just going nightclub to nightclub? Or is it a whole bunch of people who are using a small amount? Like, just seeing what's left over does not give us any of that information. Well, we have all these like population level ideas that are saying like, okay, yeah, we can look at wastewater and we can look at dust and we can look at swabs. Like, that just tells us in general which things are more popular. It doesn't tell us how many people are actually using. We need a better way of measuring this to figure out what we need to be focusing on from the science perspective.